Hey, today I want to go over Sohcahtoa. It's a trigonometry type of thing. So you might learn it before calculus, maybe in pre-calculus or algebra 2. Yeah, that's where I learned it, algebra 2. But yeah, it has to do with those buttons on the calculator that say sin or cos or tan. And no, it's not meaning the tan as in the skin color. That's actually, it has a certain meaning. So this is actually, Sohcahtoa is actually a helpful, I guess, mnemonic device in how we can remember, some trigonometry. So the S in so, that stands for sine. The O means the opposite. And the H is hypotenuse. And I'll go over what those are for. Hypotenuse. Maybe that's how you spell it. But I'll go over what those mean. C is what cosine. And A is that adjacent. And then the H is hypotenuse again. And the T stands for tangent. Kind of like going off tangents. O is opposite again, and A is adjacent again. So this is just an easier way to remember this. And so the general thing what we learn about is that sine, it's a function of some angle, let's put as theta. That's going to be the opposite side of a triangle divided by the triangle's hypotenuse. And that's how it is for all of this. So cosine of an angle, that's going to equal the adjacent over the hypotenuse. And tangent of some angle is going to be the opposite over the adjacent. And these are easy ways to remember. That's what we learned what sine is, and cosine and tangents, but that's not the actual definition. And I'll actually go over the definition of sine, cosine, and tangents. These are just helpful ways to memorize a ratio that goes along with it. So if we look at two triangles, there's going to be a red one and this blue one. So we got to make sure that these are similar triangles. So I'll just put the triangle A, B, and C are similar to D, E, F. And what similar means, that's a whole new thing. That just basically means they have the same angles, and that means they also have the same proportions with the side lengths. So the definition of sine and cosine is if there's a right angle, right, we have right here, and the hypotenuse is 1, and also the bottom length is going to be cosine of theta, and the side length is sine of theta. This is the definition. It needs to be a right triangle, and the hypotenuse is 1. That's going to be super important. And so let's see Sohcahtoa in action. So what that means is that the cosine of theta is going to be the opposite over, adjacent for hypotenuse. And so say this is 3, 4, and 5, not drawn to scale. The adjacent side to this angle is going to be the one that's right next to the angle, but it's not the hypotenuse. So in this case it's 3. It's going to be 3, and the hypotenuse is 5, so longest one. So cosine of this angle is going to be 3 over 5. But where that actually comes from, where did we actually get that? I thought the definition was this whole thing, and that's what it is. So let's think of it like this. Remember how I said before that these two are similar triangles? So that means they should have the same angles, and that the ratios of the side lengths should be equal, should be perfect. So that means, say, let's do a ratio between this divided by that. So the adjacent side divided by the hypotenuse. So in that case, that would be cosine of theta divided by 1. Oh, in a similar case, that should be 3, 4, 5 again. That means we should have the bottom one divided by the hypotenuse, 3/5. Oh, isn't that exactly what we just had? We just had cosine of theta equals 3/5. So now let's change these numbers into, let's just say this is going to be the adjacent side. This is going to be the opposite side of the angle. And this is going to be the hypotenuse. Alright, so cosine divided by 1 should be the same thing as the adjacent over hypotenuse. Hey, and that's exactly what that is. Cosine equals adjacent over hypotenuse. That's what the CAH part is. And then we can do the same thing for sine. Okay. So let's do this one divided by that one. So the right side divided by the hypotenuse. So now we have opposite over hypotenuse. Hey, that's what the SO is part of. SOH, Sohcahtoa. And then we could do tangent. I haven't gone over the definition of tangent, but what the definition of tangent is, tangent of theta, that's actually going to be sine of theta divided by cosine of theta. Oh, but we already said sine is the same thing as saying the opposite divided by its hypotenuse. And we also said cosine is just adjacent divided by hypotenuse. Okay, so this is a fraction on a fraction. We just rewrite that as the opposite over hypotenuse divided by the adjacent over hypotenuse, which we could actually rewrite that. If we have a fraction divided by fraction, we could actually flip and multiply. So we have the opposite over hypotenuse times the hypotenuse over adjacent. Oh, there's a hypotenuse on top and bottom. So that should equal 1. Hypotenuse divided by hypotenuse is 1. So now we're left with, hey, the opposite over adjacent. That should equal tangent of theta. Hey, and that's actually what it is. Sohcahtoa. And that's actually where it came from. And so that's actually where it came from, the Sohcahtoa. So I'll show you some other cool things about what we can know from this definition right here. Well, let's recall something called the Pythagorean Theorem. That says a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Well, if you notice right here, this definition of sine and cosine, we have a side length, so let's square that. So cosine squared. And then now we have the other side length, which is just sine. Let's square that. Sine squared of theta. And that should equal the hypotenuse squared, which is just 1. So 1 squared. So there's actually an identity that you'll see pretty often. It's called cosine squared of theta plus sine squared of theta equals 1. And that's actually where it comes from. And that's called the Pythagorean Identity. And that's actually why. And another fun fact, so because the unit circle, it's a circle that has a radius of 1, so because it's actually a unit circle, if we remember over here, for this triangle, the hypotenuse is 1. So what if we just draw a line, say right here, to go straight down and left, we actually have ourselves a right triangle right there. And so that means, if you remember, the bottom one is cosine. So say you need cosine of 30 degrees. all I have to do is look for that little triangle right here, and the cosine value is actually going to be this x value. And the y value of this is going to be our sine of theta. So say sine of 30, that should be 1/2. And cosine of 30, that should be square root of 3 over 2. And so that's a nice and easier way to see which one of those they are.